scholar, and we celebrate you. And we again welcome you to the Hill virtually. We hope that you can come in person in the near future,
Me
but
too.
we will take this right now. So I will turn it back over to you and Dr. Shakir, and thank you, guests, for being here today.
We're excited to have Dr. Wiggins back, and Dr. Wiggins, you have the floor. Thank you again.
About the agenda for today. So last time I kind of gave you kind of an overview, reviewing some of the things that are related to statistics and research design and that type of thing. I walked through how I want you to use the resource that I provided to you guys, the PDF resource. And then what I want to do today, though, is give you some time to, I'm not presuming that everybody had a chance to do their homework or anything like that. But so I want to take a little bit of time for some individual work for everybody to just kind of log off camera and sit and look through the document that I shared. And if you don't have it, please let who do we need to let know if somebody needs to get the resource?
Me. I put that in the chat too.
Oh,
just email me. My email address is there if you need to choose that resource. Yep.
So if you need that resource, which is the PDF, you go ahead and get it. And what I want you to do is sit with it, kind of walk yourself through a couple of those. The only parts that you really need to pay attention to are the research question that's being asked at this moment, and then try to think of your own research question, something related to your research that sounds like, or that you can make sound like. So this is not, I'm not making you say, oh, this is going to be my research question. What I want you to do is just sit for a moment and look through the different types of models, and then statistical models, but also look at the types of questions that are being asked so that you can try to relate it to your own research, your own ideas that you have right now, and then walk through, again, like how would you phrase your research question? What type of statistical test is here? What is it telling you about what you need to do with that research question when you get your data back, in order for you to answer it? And then, think about justifying your choice. One of the things that you're going to have to do quite often getting your doctorate degree is you have to justify your choices. People are really afraid of kind of this whole idea that you have to defend a dissertation and defend a proposal. Well, it really just means that you are standing in front of people and you're saying, I did this research, I am the expert, here are my choices, here is why I chose to do certain things. And when you are able to give people a rationale for the choices that you made, people are less likely to then attack and say that you've done something wrong, or you should have done this, or you should have done that. And so one of the things that I always like to teach students is make a choice and then defend it. Tell yourself, why is this the test that I need to use? Because if somebody asks you that, oh, well, why did you do a regression analysis and you didn't do an Anova? You have to be able to explain to them why you chose that regression analysis. And somebody might just be asking you just because they want to test to see how much you know about what you're doing, that type of thing. So anyway, that's that part. Then I want us to come back together and just have a general, kind of whole group. Everybody doesn't have to share, but a Q&A, whether you did homework over the week, whether you had some questions as you were going through the document at this time, we want to address those questions. So we'll do that for about 15-20 minutes. And then ultimately, I want to show you guys how to do 2 different types of regression, walking you through SPSS like we did last time with a couple of tests. And the reason I'm choosing these 2 tests is because in most cases, and I think who I've been communicating with, because I think that they'll second me on this one. In most cases, a lot of research questions, understanding what's happening with a lot of research, you can run regression models, and it's a pretty strong model. So there is a chance that several of you may end up having to run a regression model. So I'm like, well, might as well just show you what that's about and how to do it while you're in a safe space, can ask any questions that you may have. And then that's it. That's all we'll be doing. Ultimately, I'll try my best, if we don't run out of time, to just kind of review for people who weren't here, go back through kind of how you need to use this document, how best to use that resource. So is everybody any questions so far before you do your individual work for about 15 minutes?
Dr. Wiggins, this is Dr. Roberts. I just wanted to ask a question. I've been working with my purpose fellow. And, you know, I'm old school and things may have changed.
Mhm.
But when I came up, we weren't allowed to ask a research question that could be answered yes or no.
Okay.
To ask it in such a way that it says, how does affect this, instead of did this affect this? What's the latest thinking?
It's the same thing. I think that like in a lot of cases, what I try to do, and hopefully my examples show that I try to do this, I'm the same way you are, Dr. Roberts, in that, you know, the way you phrase your question is important. You should not be asking those questions that only give you a yes or a no, because the idea is not just about that it's a yes or no question. The idea is a research question is a robust question that you have to collect data to answer. And a yes no question, oh, did the students, did the students, do well in math? A better question would be, what were the effects of this program on students' math achievement, that type of thing. Because then that allows you to kind of explore what's going on here, as opposed to you being able to go to a teacher and say, hey, did they do a good job in math on this math test once you finished? Oh yeah, they did. That's the end of it. End of story, end of discussion. So I agree with you that phrasing your research question is an important task for people who are, especially if you're doing a dissertation. It has to be a question that's framed robustly, but even more importantly, it has to have this weird balance of broadness but succinctness, like focus. Like it has to be, I'm looking into students and their experiences in mathematics, for example. Here's an issue. There are inequitable experiences in mathematics of students in middle school classrooms. And what I want to know is, if I put this program in place, or if they did X, Y, and Z, then does that do X, Y, and Z? Or I want to know the relationship between students' experiences in schools and these programs and this other thing. So I don't know if that answers your question directly, Dr. Roberts, but I'm with you on avoiding yes, no questions that have yes, no responses.
Thank you. It does.
Others? Questions before we just spend our individual work? All right. Well, let me see what the time is. And again, I want to remind us, so we're going to take that PDF document. I can say that you probably might you definitely want to avoid the first test that's shown. I can't remember what page that is on, because more than likely you're not going to be, it's kind of a too much of a simplistic test for somebody to say, oh yeah, this is what you're going to do for your dissertation. You're going to run this type of statistical model or whatever, but just try to, and let me say this, let me make very clear about this thing before we go forward with this. I'm only doing this for the purpose of an exercise. Normally, what I would talk to students about is, what are you interested in? And we would go from there all the way down to, okay, well, what do you want to know about this phenomenon? And then we would discuss, all right, let's think about the best methods to answer that question. So those methods might be qualitative, it might be mixed methods, it might be quantitative. So I don't want to give you the impression that this is the way you think of a research question. I'm doing this for the purpose of giving you guys something to practice in case you are going to do, in case quantitative methods is what you're going to use. So just making sure you're clear on that. So what I want you to do is go through that document, think about your research or your interest. You might not even be ready to think about your research yet, but just what your interests are in these spaces. What you see in this document is examples in the space of, achievement and education and that type of thing, and reading, writing, math, that type of thing. But that doesn't, you can plug in any terms, and then think about that test and then justify why this is the right test. And then you do that work, we come back together, whatever questions you have, make sure you jot them down, so that we can address them. And good. So we come back at 5:30. So we're right at 5:15. We'll come back at 5:30. Oh, let me see if there's anything in the chat.
Can you please, Ms. Dr. Wiggins, please, thank you so much. Could you please leave the document up so we can read the assignment?
The thing, yes, my bad.
Thank you.
Why do I do stuff like that? Thank you. There it is. Yeah. Wait. Did I share? Is it back up? No. What's happening? Okay. I'm coming back. Oh, I'm in the wrong Zoom. I did not know until recently I can be in 2 Zoom meetings at one time. It's not
Yes.
feasible, but I can. It's amazing.
Yes.
I actually did it.
I've been in 3 at once before, and it was very, why did I do that? During the height of the, when COVID first started. Yeah.
Like I can't cancel neither one of these. So
No.
you can be in 3 places at one time. Look at the pandemic. Okay, there it is. So we'll return back. I mean, we just make sure you just kind of get back on and I'll start talking again at 5:30. Just letting you know we have 5 more minutes. Okay. We are, wait, am I sharing? Am I not sharing? I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, back together. Oh, I'm very much in the screen is what I'm doing. Okay, let me sit back some. My head is big enough. All right, we're back together again, guys. So I want us to just have a Q&A. I want you all to feel comfortable, just asking your question. Don't think about what it sounds like. Just come on out with it. I'm pretty sure I can figure out what you're asking. And it can be about anything. It can be about research in general. It can be about your particular project, because I found that during these times, people asking about their particular project usually helps other people as well. And so whoever wants to go first, please do.
Can I jump in?
Yes, jump in.
All right, lovely. So I took a little advice from Dr. Bureauer gave. So my research question, hopefully this right. My research question is, how well do males with low socioeconomic status compare with males with high socioeconomic status perform on the reading scores?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to compare those two groups, those two independent variables, and use the reading scores as the dependent variable.
Mm-hmm. Because you want to know the difference between two groups. Well, and the groups are economic status, but they're also males with low and high economic status. Did I hear you right?
Yes, I yes.
Okay.
And that was my research question. Based on the document, I selected multiple regression.
Okay. Tell me. Okay. Tell us why you selected multiple regression. Justify your choice.
I selected the multiple regression because the multiple regression, it'll allow me to compare the means of the different independent variables. So comparing both the means of the males with low socioeconomic status with males with high socioeconomic status, and the multiple regression is a test that will allow me to find out, the mean difference between both of those groups, and I'll be able to look at all of the different scores of those different groups. I did have a question, but I'll just wait at the end if I.
Yeah. So let me tell you a couple of things about so a regression model could be used to answer that question. However, you could actually simply do an independent t-test, because you're looking at two groups. You're comparing the two group differences on one dependent variable, and the dependent variable is continuous. And when I talk to you guys about, let me share and just hold on, don't just bear with me, because I want this is a really good question that you just asked. So he would not be wrong. And this is, let me go back here and let me find where two independent samples T, you have a one independent variable with two levels, because you got two independent groups, right? And then you have one dependent variable, which is an interval scale variable, meaning it's a numerical value that has an actual 0 point. It makes I shouldn't say it anyway. Absolute zero. So you could do a two samples t-test and you would get an answer to your question. However, this is really what I want you to hear. When people try to understand whether or not groups are different on like in academics or something, math, reading, whatever it is, do not limit yourself, especially because you're in a doctoral program. Do not limit yourself to just that kind of just getting one answer. This kind of goes back to what Dr. Roberts was saying about, can we, it's not, you didn't ask a yes, no question, but what I'm getting to is, how can we make that a more robust model? Meaning, there are some relationships between students' math and how they do in reading and stuff. There are, you might want to know more about, this math program has these other components in it. So I really kind of want to know. Oh, here's a good example. I did some research with on an Algebra 1 class that integrated social emotional learning. And everybody wanted to know, okay, do the students perform better? Do they perform better than the traditional Algebra 1 class? All right, you want to know that? Well, guess what I also want to know? I want to know whether or not those social emotional learning, like what's the relationship between those things and not just math, but what about what happens in English? What about what happens in these other spaces? So what I want to do here, I'm only saying this to push you to think about, if you were to do research, you definitely want to know like what is going on with the male students who are low SES, male students who are high SES in their math achievement outcomes, but also push yourself to think about what are some other things I can find out? What are some other factors that are important? The way you push yourself is by reading the literature that goes into your literature review. What does the literature say about relationships between math and math learning? Or for example, right now everybody's so interested in STEM. What about what difference does it make for them being a part of whatever it is? What difference is it making in their science scores and their math scores and that type of thing? And so I will say you did not choose a wrong test, but I want you to push yourself farther into what more can I understand and know? And then take when you think about that, take a step back and try to make a list of your dependent variables and your independent variables, and then come back to this table or something like that and say, okay, let me see what type of model I want to run, because let's just say you want to look at math and reading and science, and you still have your groups of students, right? And you also might want to know more about, why limit yourself to just males? And unless you're talking about a particular program, you might say, well, what about the females too? I want to know about them too, that type of thing. That's when you move all the way down to the bottom into like a multivariate regression, where you have multiple independent variables and multiple dependent variables. But my point here is to push yourself to think about creating some scholarly work that is based and grounded in other research that then pushes the envelope and allows you to give more information to the field. Do you have another question with that, or can I move on and ask if there are other questions? All right. What happened to my people? They went away. Did I get kicked off?
No, you're still here. You're with us.
We're still here.
Everyone's here.
Why can't I find anybody? Okay, well, I know why I can't find anybody, because I got the thing. Me and this Zoom, you would think. Okay.
I was gonna say hover over your little tag, you know what I'm trying to say.
I'll just hover everywhere until I find the people. Okay, next question. Other questions?
Hello, my name is Alexis.
Hey, Alexis.
I was last week, but I'm trying to fill myself in. So I do have a research start, but
okay.
Like Dr. Roberts said, I just don't know how to get away from the question for my research question, not posing it in a yes or no form, if that makes sense.
It makes sense.
Okay, so it says, or what I wrote down is, do counselor education courses increase counselors in training self-awareness and help develop a self-care plan? So I don't know how to, I guess, change it to help me write a better proposal.
I'm so happy that you asked that question.
If that makes sense.
It does, and I'm happy that you asked the question, but not necessarily for the reason that you asked it. One of the things that I see in your question is that there's something to unpack there. And what I mean by that is you mentioned counseling. So what I see you looking for is, here's a counseling program, and I want to know if it has an impact on, what was the first thing you said?
Self-awareness.
Self-awareness, and then you said something else.
Plan.
Say that again, because you got cut off.
A self-care plan.
Okay. what I would strongly suggest you do, and I don't, you know, of course, I'm glad Dr. Roberts is here so she can, you know, push back or what, you know, so just listen to me, but don't do what I say, you know, work with Dr. Roberts. What I would suggest you do is that you actually have a 2-part question. One of your questions is just about their self-awareness. What are the outcomes related to their self-awareness? And what are the changes related to their self-awareness? A way that you can word that question is just like I was saying, like, what does participation how does participation in this program affect participant self-awareness? Okay, but then you have another piece of your question that is leading me to think that you may be going in the realm of a mixed method study, which is fine, because the other piece sounds more qualitative to me. The other piece sounds qualitative because you want to know, okay, so let's see here, and this is just, let me give you this example. Okay, let's see what changes happen in their self-awareness. Well, then you might want to dig further and find out, okay, like, first of all, why did it happen? What changed? Why did your self-awareness change? What parts of the program really do you think contributed to your shifts in self-awareness? And then that other piece that you're ultimately wanting to know, what then, you know, are you doing about it? Like, what is, I can't remember exactly what you said. Just tell me one more time that second piece.
A self-care plan.
Self-care.
So that you basically said it. Addiction. Yeah.
Exactly. So now that you're self-aware, are you creating this self-aware plan? How are you creating the self-aware plan? What are you doing about that type of thing? And so that's the way that I would characterize your research.
Yeah.
That it's 2-part and not just one question. Because the reason I halted with her question is because you guys may not remember last time, but I was saying how you need to do something that is researchable in a particular time frame, and you want to set yourself up for success by saying, here's all I want to know right now, or here's what I want to know here, but then I'm going to answer this next question. So give yourself some type of structure and parameters to get everything answered.
You have a question in the chat,
Okay.
Dr. Wiggins.
Okay.
Seems like a correlation question. What is the relationship between socioeconomic status and scores?
And scores, yep, it does. It's a relationship question, but it's also a you could use it. You could do a regression model because you want to know, you know, how do scores shift? For example, how do scores shift? And this could be a linear regression. How do scores shift as a result of something else? Like just, you know, this people attend this, and then this, you know, it goes up. You know, scores. The relationship increases or decreases or whatever the case may be. Also, it allows you to see, when you look at the descriptive results of it, it allows you to see kind of where the score, you know, who's doing better, which groups are doing are doing better. Another thing that you just made me think about with that question was, I forgot. I can't remember what I was going to say. Oh, I know what I was going to say. In the example I gave about math and social emotional learning, there are 7 constructs in the survey that we use, that we've designed and where I work, and it's validated and stuff. And there's 7 different SEL constructs. One is growth mindset, one is self-efficacy. We got what else? Agency. And when we do our research, we like to think of those as separate things. So we don't roll them into just one SEL concept. And so Alexis, be cautious about that too. That you know, think about it more as pieces as opposed to a whole, so that you can contribute to literature that talks about growth mindset, or things that talk about persistence and agency and identity development and stuff like that. So just be sure, if you're using a survey, that you don't lump the whole survey score into one thing, or you don't, you know, just kind of try to unpack and say, I really want to know the relationship between this, and this, you know, that. And then the same way I was mentioned to the other student, once you think through all of this, start to list out your independent variables and your dependent variables. And then that takes you back to the document to say, what is my best statistical test? Because I know what these things are, I know what I'm looking for changes in. And so now I can pick a test. All right.
Okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have one. This is Stephen Bowen.
Hey, Stephen.
And just finishing up the coursework in my PhD, so I haven't moved to candidacy yet.
Good child.
So I'm still trying to figure. Trying to figure it out.
It's the worst time of my life when I finish my coursework. I'm like, what do these people expect me to do? I don't know anything.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting to that worst time in my life at this point, because it's been 2 years of crazy.
I know that's right.
It's like I say, PhD stands for Professional Hazing and Development.
Oh, I think that's great. Yes, absolutely. That's all they want to know. Did you make it through? I don't care what you know. Did you make it through?
Can you survive?
Exactly.
But so what I'm looking at, and really, my dissertation will be quantitative, and it doesn't really have a research question. It has more hypothesis statements that I'm going to test for. Mm-hmm. But to give you an idea of the basic gist, the basic purpose is going to be to determine, at this point, I know it can change within the next 6 months, if a correlation exists between African-American male 4th grade NAEP scores and graduation rate and college entrance.
Okay.
And I'm going to look at population in a large urban district, and just look at their 4th grade, the 2010-11 cohort, because that would put them at graduation at 2018, which is pre-pandemic. And I feel like that data is, I can get that data.
Okay. What was the second one, Stephen? You said the graduation rates, and then what else?
And college entrance.
Okay. So it sounds like to me. Oh, go ahead. Do you want? Because I'm ready to jump right in. Go ahead and finish talking.
So I figured my independent variable is the 4th grade NAEP score, and the dependent variables would be graduation rate and college entrance for that cohort of students.
Yes. The way I want you to reframe what you're talking about is it's not just about relationship. It's really this is a true predictive model. You want to know, because if you think about it, eventually what you're trying to get at is, if we know students' 4th grade NAEP scores, we can predict, like, let's say if you did this repeatedly, you went to every single, school district in the nation. You would eventually be able to say, hey, look, we got a preponderance of evidence that 4th grade NAEP scores predict graduation and college entrance. And so I want you to make sure you frame your question as a regression question. You want to know whether or not 4th grade NAEP scores predict later outcomes, graduation rates, college entrance. And you also you're going to be looking at a logistic regression, because you're too deep. You're going to be actually looking for, I'll come back to that one in a second. But the reason for it is because your dependent variables are kind of yes, no. Did I graduate or did I not graduate?
Right.
Did I go to college or did I not go to college? One other thing I think is important for you to know, for you to note in all of your research, is to kind of break out these questions into two. Like you said, it's a series of hypotheses, right? So the first is about the prediction of NAEP scores and graduation rates. The next one is about college entrance. So think about a couple of things. Think about first, are you thinking about using that same cohort from graduation and seeing if they went to college? And if that's the case, then that's absolutely what you should be doing.
Yes.
But make sure you put in some literature around. So here's what let me just put it like this. Here's what I don't want you to do. I want you to make sure that you are not, I want you to eliminate any kind of assumptions and make sure you kind of answer some questions. So here's an example. Students who probably score very high in 4th grade on their math NAEP scores are more than likely going to go to college and graduate anyway. So I want you to give yourself a little bit of kind of, make sure you make a determination about, like, what is this 4th grade group, this graduation group, what about their demographics can I just test out in this model to see if there are differences related to race and gender and socioeconomic status and that type of thing. Because I want you to be sure that you tease out a little bit of somebody coming to you saying, well, what I just said, you know, what people who do well on these standardized tests, they're probably going to go to college anyway. So you're not, you know, what you're predicting something that we kind of could guess about, you know, which is, I mean, people should, but I just want you to make sure you're thinking about all those different pieces and looking at these student groups, looking more at student groups and that type of thing, and not just at the score as if everybody performs the same way and everybody has the same outcomes as a result, if that makes sense.
So would that be akin to, say, I'm looking at 4th grade African-American males, and then teasing it more into the subgroup of those males, free reduced lunch Title I students versus non-Title I, that kind of a thing?
Yes, do stuff like that, because that'll give you, first of all, your design will be more robust, and it'll also give you more information about what I think your problem is, what you're trying to explore here. And so yeah, I would certainly do that to see if there's, and then it also you might find out, like research has found out lately, and I can't even remember the name, it found out that people assume that the experiences of African Americans who are middle class and above are different than those who are you know, going to college, graduating college, persisting, those types of things. Where research has shown that regardless of your socioeconomic status, African Americans, you know, in this particular, what I'm talking about, which I'm not giving, you know, I'm not being clear about it, but I can't remember. It basically, the research showed that regardless of socioeconomic status, the outcomes are similar. And so I want you to make sure you can make a statement like that, either, oh, it does make a difference if you are African American male and, you know, high income, or African American, you know, low income, that type of thing.
Okay.
So, yep. Any other questions? And then we can jump right into me showing you these 2 different models.
Oh, I have one more question. So for my research question, could, or to what extent the NAEP scores predict, like, would that be good for it since it's 2 different variables? Or
who is this asking this? What I need what?
Oh, sorry, Alexis. I should just
Alexis again. Say
yes,
that,
ma'am.
Alexis. Remind me of what you were saying to begin with. Your research question.
Yes, ma'am. So it was, do counselor education courses increase counselors in training self-awareness and develop a self-care plan?
Okay. Let me say a couple of things. You're talking about people who are in a counseling program. Is this the people who are getting a counseling degree? Or are you talking about people who get counseling?
Getting a counseling degree.
Okay, so people who get a counseling degree, you want to know if their program, them being in their program, makes a difference to a couple of outcomes. Them creating this plan, them being self-aware, that type of thing.
Yes.
Before we get to your question about scores and stuff, what I'm wondering about is your independent variable in this, because I need, you need to give some more definition around what you mean by being in the program, because like I could imagine that your the data that you collect is either going to be they either went through the program or they didn't go through the program, you know. And then what do you mean by program? Like, is going through the program meaning that you completed the full suite of courses, you did your internship, and you did this, you know? So try to figure out a way to create some type of comparison might be helpful, to say, okay, I want to know the outcomes if you went through everything, including your counselor, you know, internship, versus people who are not even there yet, or not, you know. I mean, there'll be a lot of nuances around that too. But I guess I'm trying this, and Dr. Roberts, I'm sure will help you with this, trying to figure out what, just making sure there's some type of real clear definition about what you mean about program. So it won't just be like, oh, you were either in the program or you weren't, that type of thing. Okay, so now ask your question about the scores. What was your question about the scores?
Would the NAEP, would it help, since I guess I'm kind of predicting? Because my like you said, it's basically off the assumption that the person or the candidates that I plan to give the survey to, like they are currently in the counseling program. So thus far, since they have been progressing through the program, like have they took that time to do a self-care plan, and have they developed more self-awareness about themselves and what type of counselor like they want to be by the time they complete the program.
Dr. Wiggins, we also have a couple other variables going on.
I was just about to say.
Because some of the students will be FSU students and some will be FAMU students.
I see.
We have access to both groups. So we have the other variable about whether being HBCU or not makes a difference.
There we go. That's
and then we also have race, because not, because some of the people at the predominantly white institution may still be students of color. So we have other variables we will be able to look at within this study.
That is good. I wonder if you guys can, I'm gonna say one thing and then we can just wrap this up. And of course, Dr. Roberts, you know how to get in touch with me, and we can unpack this some more anytime. But I wonder if you guys can use a control variable there. Like, do counselors have to take a test to get accepted into the counseling program at both places, and use that as a control variable? Because my hypothesis would be that people who, do really well on, whoever score in this like upper percentile on whatever test that they have to get into schools might be more self-aware or something like that. There might be something there. And so make sure you control for that so that doesn't influence your outcomes, so that what they scored when they came into the program doesn't influence the results in any type of way. I think that might be a good idea, is to figure out, either it's that or something else that kind of equates these two groups in some way, so you can remove all of the noise, if you will, around what the results look like. But thanks, Dr. Roberts, I see that you do have a couple of groups, and I understand more about what the issue is.
Right, and there isn't a test to get in the program, but what we might use as a proxy is like people who've taken under 30 hours versus over 30 hours or something.
Yes, yep. Because they would, I guess you're saying, because you would imagine the people who've been in the program longer are going to just probably have more self-awareness anyway. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Okay, let's stop here since we're at the top of the hour almost, and let's pull up our SPSS package. I'm going to walk us through, make sure everybody has it up. Well, let me stop sharing here, and then we're going to load. Oh, I like that. Dr. Fleming put in the chat an idea for somebody about looking at NAEP scores by gender, race, school, kind of different ways to understand some things about what's going on. Yeah, and I also, and Serena, I like this. I mean, Dr. Roberts, this using NAEP scores to kind of predict future results. I think some of this work has probably been done, and you can get a lot of literature from it, and making sure you you allow that literature to guide you as much as possible. Okay, so there's mine, and then let me open it up real large and walk through. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. SPSS, make sure hope this is the right one. Okay, we're gonna start with logistic regression, and I'm showing a blank screen. I just opened up my SPSS, and then I'm gonna go in up to file. Move this out of the way. File, open. No, I'm not opening. I'm opening some data. And then I'm going to get the file that I shared with you guys. Where did it go? Hold on a second, guys. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. We have some flood warnings or something that's open data. And why is this not? Okay, there we go. Is it this one? I think so. Okay. Here's a couple of things I want to show you guys. When you are, this is very simple, and I'm pretty sure when you guys, what I'm about to say is quite simple, and I'm pretty sure you guys have experienced this when you took the course, but just wanted to make sure everybody is clear. It is very important for you to understand the structure of your data when you're inputting information in, because like, let's just say you're collecting all this data, or let's say the guy who's talking about the NAEP scores is going to get a score file they're going to get a secondary score file that has NAEP scores, and it has, graduation rates, and it has all of these things. Well, you got to make sure you structure the file properly. And what you see here is, create some type of ID, for whoever you're talking about, and then just make sure that you're putting, when you input in your records, that everything is, is what it needs to be in there. That's why I'm saying that once you figure out what your research question is, take a second and say, here's my dependent variable, here's my independent variable. That tells you what data do I need. If you're doing a survey, you need to make sure that survey is structured properly. I mean, not structured properly, but you need to make sure you are, you create a column for your individual survey responses. So each person is a row. Each participant is a row. And so I just wanted to just make sure that's clear. Okay, now going to the, you guys can look at the PDF document, and then I can too. And I want to walk us through, let's go to page 17. Oh, you know what? Before I go there, I wanted to say something about regression models. So let me change my screen share.
That last document that I just put in the chat, you have to have SPSS in order to open it. Yes. So if you don't have SPSS, that may be why you can't access it. As students, I believe you do have access to SPSS for free. So you can always check with your professor about how to do that.
Yeah, and I guess other students can say it better than I can. If you're not able to walk through this with us today, hopefully you can practice by yourself, and it gives you kind of this step-by-step guide, and you can probably feel a little bit more comfortable about what you're doing because you have it right there with you. Here's what I want to say about regression models. Look at linear regression, logistic regression, multiple regression, and then down at the bottom we have multiple logistic regression and multivariate multiple regression. The main things that are important for you to know is that when you are talking about a linear regression or a logistic regression, you're only talking about one independent variable and one dependent variable. And if you're doing a linear regression, your dependent variable is going to be a continuous interval or scale type of dependent variable. It's going to be some type of numerical value. It's not going to be, it's not going to be on this Likert ordinal scale or anything like that, but it'll be, a score or something like that. Weight or height in inches or something like that. When you do a logistic regression, you have one independent variable and one dependent variable. So let's say gender and whether or not you graduated. The important thing about a logistic regression is your variable is going to be categorical. So anytime you you know your variable is not numerical, it's not, and when I say categorical, I mean it could be on a Likert scale, it could be just yes, no, or whatever, but you got to make sure that you have a categorical variable. That tells you to use a logistic regression. The other thing that tells you to use a logistic regression is that you have only one independent variable. So let's say it might be, whatever it is. Now, when it comes down to multiple regression, you still have one dependent variable, and that is a numerical value. That's a scale variable, interval variable, but you can have multiple dependent variables. That's what the multiple means in multiple regression. I'm sorry, multiple independent variables. You have, I want to look at, math scores and race and the impact on reading. Something like that could be a multiple regression. You have multiple independent variables, or you can have, anyway, and you have one dependent variable. Now, hop all the way down to the end. And if you have multiple, if you want to look at a logistic regression where you want to put more inputs in, more independent variables in, then you're looking at a multiple logistic regression. This one here is what the multivariate multiple regression is where I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of you ended up. The reason for it is because you can have a lot of different independent variables and a lot of different outcome variables, and it'll be a very strong regression model. Okay, so we're looking at, we're not looking at, remember, if you get down to multivariate multiple regression, you're looking at, interval scale variables, that type of thing. So it's not looking at categorical anything, but I can see, because I hear a lot of you talking about scores and all those types of things, I can see you using, scores and different, categories of people, race and gender and math scores. And then on this end, on the dependent variable end, I can see you looking into, okay, what do the science scores look like when we have all these factors? What do, those types of things. So I just wanted to go over that really quickly for you to be able to just quickly distinguish between the type of regression model you might need to use. Okay, so now back to here, and we want to go to page 17 to do a logistic regression. Easy if I just jump down here. Oh, one quick thing about correlations. So whenever the reason I pushed earlier, when I pushed the student to say, no, you actually have a predictive model, is because correlations only kind of answer one thing. It tells you about the relationship between variables, meaning it tells you, do reading and writing score, is there a relationship between reading and writing scores? It'll answer the question, yes, there is one, going back to those yes, no questions. Yes, there's a relationship, there's a strong positive, or there's a negative correlation, that type of thing. But that's where it stops. It doesn't give you any predictive values. It doesn't give you any odds ratios. It doesn't help you understand more about the results. And so if you want to understand more about kind of like, if you want to go beyond just knowing whether or not there's a relationship, then you want to do predictive modeling. You want to do a regression model that then pushes you into, like, well, what are things looking like? When so I know there's a relationship between two things, but what does this relationship look like for, different groups of students? Or what do scores look like for different groups of students if you look at a lot of these predictors? So I say that. Okay, now down to page, that's linear regression. Logistic regression is next. Okay. So I start off explaining logistic regression kind of in the context of, I'm thinking that you guys have read every single thing up to this point, right? So that's why I start off with, just like a linear regression, logistic regression tests the linear relationship between a predictive variable and an outcome variable. And so remember, we're talking about only two variables. One is a predictor, which is also called an independent variable. And then one is an outcome variable, which is also called your dependent variable. So just two things. The difference in the difference between the two is that the logistic regression assumes that your dependent variable is binary, it's categorical. It's, it's not a, if you're doing logistic regression, remember, it is a categorical variable that you are looking at for your dependent variable. The sample question I put here is, do reading scores predict gender? Which is kind of a weird way of thinking about it, you know, but let's just go with it for the sake of figuring out this, you know, walking through the test. Or you could say, what is the relationship between reading scores and gender? So it's a relationship. Regression gives you correlation and regression, basically. That's why you can use the phrase relationship. The independent variable is gender, because you want to know if something predicts gender, meaning that if reading scores predict gender. So wait, why is this the other way around? Anyway, so your independent variable is gender. Your independent variable is reading scores. I made a mistake here, which I see, and I need to make another correction. And your dependent variable is your gender variable. That's your outcome variable, your categorical variable. You're either female or male in this data set. What I need to change is the independent variable. So if you want to scratch it out right now, I'll do it later. And say that your independent variable is your reading scores. Okay. Now let's go. Here's what I asked you guys to do is just copy and paste your syntax. And I'm going to go to my syntax screen. So I'm going to open up, let me open up my, wait, let me find my syntax screen. I didn't open it. In order to open your syntax screen, get you a fresh new syntax screen. You might be using your old one, so you can open that. If you had one from last time, you can open and just continue there, or you can just open up a new one, and then you can go to File, New, and Syntax. The reason you want to open the syntax is because that's what we are. Let me stop this. Okay, because that's what we're doing. So let me share. We're using syntax instead of is this a syntax screen? Okay. Instead of point and click. So then you paste it right there. And now a couple of things here. Remember, you can copy and paste any syntax that you see here into a syntax window. However, when you're using your own research, you can change anything that's in black font, you know, so your independent and dependent variables might be different. And so just make sure you make those changes, but don't mess with this part because it's telling you what to do. A logistic regression with this and that. So don't change that part. Highlight the whole thing, press play, and then it's going to give you some output. My other screen shows you what you need to know in this output. Remember, we wanted to know the relationship between reading scores for males and females. I'm going to go right back to the actual form so we can walk through it together. The actual PDF form where it explains how to interpret every one of these different pieces of output. And there we go. Okay. So there's the output here. I'm sharing it here, and it's the same stuff that came in your your output for SPSS. And these are the tables. I listed them here, which you should be looking at. So if you look at the the encoding table, the only thing that you need to know there is just reminding you how things are dummy coded. Male is 0, female is 1. You don't need to do anything with it. It's just giving you that idea. And you can see the glossary for more information about dummy coding. The Omnibus Test of model coefficients. It tells you that the overall model is not statistically significant, right? And so what I'm showing you in this one, I'm reading right here. Hold on, wait, let me go back. I'm reading right here. The Omnibus Test, I'm on page 17, okay? Because the p-value of where is my test? Here. No, that's the wrong model. Oh, it's showing you this test first. Okay, so it's showing you, first of all, that you can look at either one of them you want to, but the significance is less than 0.05, which means that the model is not statistically significant. Now, ignore that table. Okay, so now go to the variables in the equation table. The two things that for this table that you need to interpret is whether or not the model is statistically significant. And it shows you how to interpret that here. And then more about the variables in the equation and what those things mean, right? Okay, so here we go. Looking at the reading score line, because that's the important line, and looking at the sig value here is telling us, because it's less than 0.05, that the difference in reading reading scores cannot be used to predict gender. So basically it's saying that, you know, if somebody was like, you know what, I wonder if we can determine somebody's gender by looking at their reading score. So this is just a practical sense. And that's why I said it sounds silly. Like, why would you do that? But that's the question. I wonder if we can predict gender using somebody's reading score. All right, well, let's take a look. Absolutely not. You cannot do that, because in the data that you have, the relationship is not, the model is not statistically significant. It's not even, you know, there's nothing to see here, ma'am. But that in that p-value of greater than 0.05 is telling you that there is not a statistically significant relationship or a prediction between reading scores and gender. Any questions about that? When you write up, so another thing I offer here is a way to write up that meaning. When you do your dissertation, please don't just have in your findings one sentence that explains. If you have, you know, give some, you know, one of the things that I have shared recently with people is like, you know, look at other articles, look how they show you their demographics of their sample, you know, look how much they present to somebody to make an argument. Here's another reason, make sure your questions are just more robust. They just capture more information, so that it just doesn't have to be you answering a very simple question about whether or not there's a predictive relationship between these two variables. But this at least gives you the way, you know, how you need to phrase your question and the statistics that you need to put in your write-up when you're writing your results. Okay. The next one is going to be a linear regression. I think I want to give you guys the linear regression pretty much. Nope, let me do it because I see some extra stuff in here. Okay. To do the linear regression, of course, you copy everything you need, and then I'll show you in this when you go to the syntax. I was able to do this a different way a little while ago, but hold on. I'm gonna have to do better. Okay, back to the syntax. Okay, you can continue. You can continue with the same syntax window. One of the things that I said last week was that, you know, you can have with your output table. Once you run syntax, an output file opens up. I shouldn't call it a table, let's call it a file. That opens up, and you should save it immediately, just in case you click around and you lose stuff. Same thing with your syntax. You can continue to have just one syntax file and just keep running stuff over and over again, but just make sure you have some lines of separation so it just won't be all up on top of each other. That's just to keep yourself in order. But again, when you copy and paste that syntax into the syntax window, with your own data, you know, make sure you have your questions straight, make sure you're clear on your independent and dependent variables. Use that guide to tease out what your independent and dependent variables are so that you can name them in the right places. I can't even remember what this question was, but we'll come back to it. Oh, actually, well, let me run the data, then we can walk through everything. Okay. So now then your output comes out, it's told you use the regression model, and then we'll go through how to understand all of this by going back to our PDF form. Okay, so this is linear regression. Similar to logistic regression, the reason why you do a linear regression is you have two variables, one predictor variable, and it needs to be interval scale. It needs to be some type of numerical continuous variable. And you have one outcome variable. It also needs to be a continuous interval scale variable. The independent variable is writing. So we want to look at the relationship between that reading and writing scores, basically. And so writing is your independent variable, your reading is your dependent variable. And then when you get down to interpret the tables, the important parts you need to know, I said ignore the model summary right now. Basically, what happens when you run these regression models and stuff, it tells you whether the model is statistically significant. And then it goes down into like whatever your real question was to find out what's going on there. So ANOVA, you guys may be familiar with this, the Anova table. I'm going to scroll down to show it. This table is exactly what you think it is. It's an ANOVA that has been run similar to you running your own ANOVA. It's giving you some idea of what's going on here. The way you interpret that is that this is for this one, you know, for now, this is a overall test of analysis of variance, any differences that are going on. And so you don't need that table for the interpretation of your linear regression model. The table that you do need is this coefficients table. This is the interpretation, but the coefficients table is where all your information is that you're going to need to explain the results of whether or not there is a relationship or whether or not writing scores predict reading scores. The first thing that I mentioned here is that the relationship between reading and writing score is 0.55. Okay, so that's column B on the reading score row. Uh-oh, I'm just scrolling too fast. Here we are. All right. So pause right there. I'm walking you through everything. The sig value is less than 0.001, which indicates that there is a relationship that writing scores may be used to predict. So you can say both. There's a relationship between reading and writing scores, and they can be used, writing scores can be used to predict reading scores. Remember, very, very simple, 0.05. If it's less than 0.05, there's a statistically significant difference. If it's greater, there is not. Even if it's 0.55 or 0.5, 0.57 or something like that, then just that's a hard, fast rule, cut it off. If you understand what p-values mean, you can probably, kind of give some nuance around that and explain it a little bit. But going with that hard, fast cutoff rule of either less than or greater than 0.5 is just the best way to go, the most consistent way to go. One of the things again, a linear regression gives you both a correlation and it gives you a prediction, whether or not there's a, again, do writing scores predict reading scores. What's important to note here is that when you see a correlation coefficient value, it tells you, the way to interpret it is correlations of 0.80 or above are positive and strong. And this is coming from the 0.55. So that what's in column B on that reading row, that 0.55 that you see, 0.552, I think is what it says. That is your correlation coefficient that you need to interpret when you're doing a regression model. And so let's see, what else am I saying? Oh, then I'm explaining how to interpret a correlation model right here, right? So just giving you some idea of how to interpret that correlation coefficient that you see here. Now, what you do with the regression model is turn that 0.55 into what's called an R square. R square tells you, so in technical terms, it basically says, when you are examining something, there's a whole thing. There's a whole. The whole in this case is reading scores. So the question is whether or not writing scores can be used to predict reading scores. But there's also all this other stuff in addition to writing scores that might make up that might explain why your reading score is the way it is, why the students' reading scores are the way it is, are the way they are, right? When you run a linear regression, you're only looking at one of those, let's say 10 things. What this R squared tells you is, of the reading scores, this is how much variability after you make the, you compute your R square and you get 0.30. That turns into a percentage. And what you end up saying is writing scores, they do predict reading scores, but that prediction only makes up 30% of what these reading scores look like. That means, and this is just something, just hear me out. It means that there are other things that then also make up why those reading scores are the way they are. That might not be a part of your research. It might be something that tells you, you know what, I got to get to the bottom of this. I want to know what all influences these reading scores. And so I need to find out. So I need to build a statistical model where it's looking at writing scores, and it's looking at gender, and it's looking at math scores, and it's looking at 10 different things for me to be able to know what makes up this whole that is called reading scores. So far, with this one linear regression, all we can explain is 30% of what's going on with the reading scores. I don't know if I just confused everybody. I'm trying to make sure people have a kind of a layman understanding of what R squared means. And the best way to make sense of it is to say there is a whole pie that is called reading scores. You as a researcher have said, you know what, I think writing scores can predict reading scores. Okay, that sounds reasonable. If you can read, you should be able to write. If you can write, you can read. That sounds very reasonable. So now you found out, they actually, okay, I see there's something to see here. Writing scores can be used to predict reading scores. But then the question remains, well, how much of the writing scores and what people do in writing explain what happened in reading? Oh, only about 30%. Then your question as a researcher, what makes up the rest of this? What makes up that 70% then? Is it their gender? Does that explain what happens with their reading scores? Is it their math scores? Does that explain? That's what pushes you to create a new model, to say, you know what, I need to look at multiple things. And so for you as doctoral students, I'm saying make sure you push yourself to understand relationships between multiple things and not just kind of this one-to-one, this can be you. Oh, yep, got my question answered. I can move on with my life. Okay. And finally, this shows you how to write up everything. And I've incorporated everything that I've explained up here, where you have to interpret what that regression score is. I mean, that correlation, that 0.55, whether that's a strong, and it's actually a positive relationship, kind of moderate relationship. The closer you get to 1, the stronger the relationship is. And then it talks about how you just interpret it. As reading scores increase, that's how you interpret correlation. The writing scores, and then you interpret the variability in that R squared. You interpret that R squared value. So this is how you kind of write up your results from your linear regression model. We have 30 minutes. I want to pause for a second and answer questions. I think that's the best thing we can do right now. So let's stop sharing.
You have a question from Frankel again.
Okay, what's your question, Frankel?
Oh yeah, Dr. Wiggins, thank you so much. It's just that last thing. So that for the ANOVA, so both the R squared and the coalition coefficient for the ANOVA are really critical when it comes to really running that test.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
For this linear regression model, let me show you what's most important. Let me open it. And with this linear regression, I already gave you kind of the R squared, so you didn't even have to compute it. But let me go back to show you what's important here. I think this one.
And to clarify, maybe I mean like really critical to my result or my hypothesis.
Yes. So you're looking for a couple of things when you're explaining a linear regression results. You're looking for the R square value to talk about variability, how much of this makes up this dependent variable. Okay, so you need to know that. You're also looking for your R in this model summary that tells you this is the relation, that R value is that regression coefficient that tells you whether or not there is that a correlation coefficient that tells you whether or not there's a relationship between two things, you know, and whether that's a positive. Remember, if there's a positive, if that correlation coefficient is a plus something or it doesn't have a sign on it, that means that there's a positive relationship. But also remember that R is interpreted from 0 to 1. And so the closer it is to 0, the weaker the relationship, the closer that value is. So let's just take this, for example. This is basically 0.6. And so it is over that 0.5, meaning it's a stronger relationship than it would be if it was less than 0.5. It's getting closer and closer to 1, but it's kind of a mediocre relationship because really strong is considered 0.8 and above. So those are the things that you need to explain. You need to explain the R value, the correlation coefficient, which is the R value, the R square, which tells you the how much variability in this outcome is made up of the predictive variable that you looked at. And then you need to understand whether or not the relationship was statistically significant. And that is where you use your coefficients table, look at that reading score row, and then make sure you look at your SIG there. And it's basically telling you, because it's less than 0.05, it's saying to you that yes, reading scores can be used to predict writing scores. That is a statistically significant prediction. And it is a moderately strong prediction because of that 0.60, that correlation coefficient. Did that confuse you? Did that help?
No, that hit it right on the head. I appreciate that, Dr. Wiggins. That was awesome. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Other people, any questions? And it doesn't have to be about regression models. It could be about whatever you want to ask about.
So this is Stephen again.
Hey, Stephen.
So going back to my looking at the using a predictive model for the NAEP scores and graduation rate and college entrance. So I have one independent variable, but I have two dependent variables. Mm-hmm. Neither are categorical. And I was looking at that chart you showed earlier of picking the if you could pull that up a second.
Yeah, you mean the chart for you to pick stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. There's got to be, what I was trying to think of for you, I have never run a logistic regression that had multiple variables, but there has to be something for it, and I need to look it up. But let me share my screen. Hold on a second, because I think that's what you're getting at.
Right, because I couldn't find where I fit there.
Yeah, because yours are graduation rates. Let me ask you this question. Are you talking about one school? I got a couple of questions for you. So where are you getting the NAEP scores from? Are you asking like from the National Student Clearinghouse or something, or does the school already have these?
No, this will be from National Clearinghouse, because the NAEP scores have about 15 districts in the country that they can, that they give you non-aggregate data. Everything else you get is aggregate from whatever sample they use. So, but for 15 districts, you have the opportunity, per their website, to get student level data.
Okay.
And so
Oh, go ahead.
No, so looking at if I can get that student level data, I can then get the data for that group out of the education data warehouse in Florida and be able to track them all the way through graduation and even college entrance.
Okay. So you'll have their NAEP scores, you'll have an identifier to be able to go in the warehouse in Florida, and then you're going to get their graduation, whether they graduated or not, and also whether they went to college or not. Yes, no.
Right.
Okay. I don't think I want you to do me a favor. I'm gonna put my email in the chat, because I'm pretty sure I can point you in the right direction, but I don't want to do it right now and steer you in the wrong way. And I want you to email me what we just talked about, and then and anybody can use this email address. Just don't overuse it. I shouldn't say don't overuse it. That's just so rude. I'm sorry. Y'all can use my email address. Austin Because how would you know you're overusing it? So I want you to email me what you just said. You can do it tonight or whatever, and I'll get back to you by tomorrow. And remind me of what you're trying to do. And then let me finish out what my question was. Yeah, because that's exactly what you need. It's a predictive model. You're looking at 2 dependent variables, and we can certainly make that happen. And where are you in your program? Are you in your data phase? You finished with your coursework?
No, I'm not finished with the coursework yet, and I still have comps to do.
Well, you are ahead of the game then, because this sounds like a robust project, and then I can also take some more time to think about like what more you could do with all that data, since you're gonna have so much on these students from these different schools. But are you looking at one particular school district though? Yeah,
just one school district.
Good. But you'll have so much information that you can just kind of run crazy, and I'm gonna help you do that.
And luckily, it'll be one of the top 6 largest school districts in the country.
Oh, that is so awesome. That is awesome. Okay, other questions? Concerns? Anybody want to try to test out? Oh, yes, somebody was talking.
I'm sorry, there was a question in the chat by Serena.
Let me see. Do I see it? Oh, I see. I see. I see. She's giving suggestions for his research question.
Dr. Fleming and I have just been playing with the wording a little bit in the background.
Yeah, I think you've got something really solid, and you're ready to roll. And once you figure out how to do it, then all it takes for you to do is run the analysis, get the data together, clean it, run the analysis, and write all that stuff up. So you're in a really good spot. Anybody, I think this probably might be a good idea for somebody on the call, to share what you're thinking about for your, like, maybe you're at a point where you're like, I'm really thinking about this. It's too broad. I'm not sure if this is what I want to do, and for you to share it here, because it might help other people. And it also might help us kind of walk through like, well, okay, that sounds like it's a qualitative question or something like that. So if somebody can come think of, help there, that might be helpful.
I can.
Thank you,
Marcia Pitts. I don't even know if I'm on the right track. So I'm interested in looking at the leadership development of macro social workers, as well as their career experiences.
Okay.
And that's how far I've gotten with that.
Okay, when you say, let's say leadership development, I need to write this down because I'm gonna forget everything. A macro social worker. What's a macro social worker?
Basically, we will deal with large scale issues, policy, research.
Okay. Leadership development of macro social workers, and what else?
Their career experiences. So basically, I want to know, are they like progressing into leadership roles? And if not, what's going on? I don't even.
Okay, so this is helpful because the questions I'm about to ask her are kind of things you guys need to be asking yourself. So here's my first question for you is like, what's the problem though? Like, is it that they're not? Is there some type of issue around macro social workers and they don't progress into leadership roles? Are they do, but it's predominantly white people who progresses to leadership roles?
The racial leadership gap has been identified as one of the reasons, but also in the research that I've done so far in my program, leadership development is a fairly new topic for the field of social work.
Okay.
A lot of the theories that we use in the profession come from business administration. Yeah. So a lot of research now is being done on developing, like identifying what are the competencies that need to be taught in social work education, theories, things like that. But racial leadership gap is one of them. But I've also identified possibly leadership self-efficacy. They don't believe that they have the tools, skills, and abilities to progress into these positions.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I'm thinking about right now is that you could possibly have maybe a mixed method study, but definitely something qualitative, Marthea, because of a couple of things I heard you say. That this whole leadership experience type of, people getting knowledge and experience in leadership and training and leadership is new to the field. So it would be great for you to be able to do some research around, okay, where are the leaders of color in this field, and finding out, how did you arrive here? What did you need? What was your journey here? And then once you arrive there, what are the tools that you use? Because obviously there's nothing, you didn't get taught these things in your program. So how are you successful? What are you doing? How are you in this position and you haven't been fired yet? Don't ask that question. But to me, Marthea, it sounds like your project is more like that. But you could also do a self-efficacy survey that is broader, that goes out to everybody, and look at, this could be a combination what you do for your research. It'll be, and I feel like it'll be robust. You could also send out that survey to everybody and collect information on the demographics, race, gender, age, or maybe not age, don't ask people, but those types of things, and look at it, whether or not there are differences by race in people's self-efficacy around leadership abilities and stuff like that. So I can see you having some two-part type of thing, or just saying, you know what, I really want to just kind of explore further leaders who are leaders of color, who are in this space and they are in these jobs, and whether or not they are, why are they productive? Why do they do such great work? Why are they still in leadership? Or you can do this kind of a self-efficacy study. What are there differences in the way leaders in the field, their self-efficacy in leadership? Are there differences by race and gender? You can do a little intersectionality there. And so those are two ideas that I'm glad you shared, because it's certainly two ideas that I think you can sit with and create something really, really informative for the field.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Very helpful. Thank you.
Others want to share or want to talk? We can talk any of this stuff. I know what I can do while you guys are still here. Is just take another second to walk through this document, to make sure everybody is just fully equipped to use it to the best of their ability. Because I said I wanted to do that before we got off. So the first thing, I want to go to the first page, and this is just giving you information about how to get your data into SPSS. So you're either going to have a file that's already created, which is not likely that you're going to have a SAS file, not SAS, I'm sorry, that you're going to have a, whatever they call, that you're going to have an actual SPSS file. You're not going to have that. So here's where you need to go with the Excel and how to load your Excel file, because you're probably going to have an Excel or a CSV file or something like that you need to load into the program. This walks you through how to do it. And then when you go here's where, I can't remember, is it Franco who was saying, oh, I was looking for my test. He was doing the right thing. Because what this is showing you, remember, once you come up with your research question, I'm going to use the example about the self-efficacy and leadership and that type of thing. So let's just say I want to know differences in self-efficacy of counselors in leadership positions, social workers, macro social workers in leadership positions. So let's just say you go all over the state of Florida and you find all the macro social workers and you send them out. You're like, please take this survey. I'm doing this research. I just want to know, how you feel about, create something that, and oh, let me say this too. The way you create that survey is you go back to what are the elements of leadership that the field is saying people need to know, macro social workers need to know. Now you said it's not a lot around it. Use what is there. And also you might want to go into education or business field and say, what are characteristics of leadership? Let me create a survey. You also could do a search and say, a leadership survey for social workers, leadership survey for teachers or principals or something like that, and business CEOs, and that'll help give you a good start. So you send that out, you say, take the survey, take the survey, take the survey. People take the survey, all this information comes back, and you have to create an Excel file that has, okay, here's person number 1, number 2, number 3, in that first column would be an ID for them. And then every column after that is going to be Q1, which is question 1, Q2, Q3, all the way through demographics. And you make sure every one of the people that you surveyed has completed that they have a record. Everybody has a record. That is your database. That's what you will use, and you will load it into SPSS to start doing your analysis. You already said, I want to know what differences in race and their self-efficacy and leadership. Going back to what I talked about, when there's a survey with multiple, there might be multiple constructs. You might have one, a survey that says, okay, there are 4 different parts of leadership, for example. So what you might decide to do is say, okay, overall, this is a score for everybody for leadership. But for each one of these different constructs, here's a score, because that gives you multiple things. It gives you multiple dependent variables. It gives you multiple independent variables. So you think about that. Don't just take your survey and say, oh, it's just one score that's going to come out of this. You might say, oh, it's multiple scores because this type of leadership is different from this type of leadership. This competency is different from this competency, that type of thing. So then you think about, what am I trying to run here? What are my independent and dependent variables? I know race, I'm interested in differences by race. Okay. I know I'm interested in I'm interested in all different 4 constructs of leadership. So that tells you, all I want to know is I have one dependent variable, everybody's grouped by race. And then that's their race group. And then I have multiple dependent variables. And then you walk through here and figure out, where does that fit? Where do I have multiple dependent variables, and where do I have one independent variable, which puts people into groups? And you're probably going to end up around here with the multiple regression if you have scores for your dependent variable. So that's how I want you to use it. First, think about, what am I trying to answer? Then make sure it is focused, talk to your advisors about it, make sure, okay, this is doable, I can do it, I can make it happen. Then go to the next step of saying, okay, if I do this research, what are my independent and dependent variables? And then walk yourself through and figure out, okay, I got this, check, I got that, check, oh, it's interval, yep, it is, I think this is the test I'm going to use. And go ahead and try and go to that page and make sure. So let's just say, okay, I think I need to do a multivariate multiple regression. That's all the way on page 24. Go all the way down there, and of course I can get here quicker. You know what? Let me just keep going. And then double check yourself. Go back. Oh, this is the glossary. Make sure you read that glossary. It tells you, it's probably the first thing you should read. Go back and say, I think I'm going to do a multivariate multiple regression. I don't know. Well, then go here, read about what it is, look at the sample question and see if your question makes sense worded in this way, or if it makes sense to have, make sure you have your independent variables, which are multiple. As I show you, there are 3 different ones. Your dependent variables is 2 different ones. Walk yourself through kind of this first part and say, yeah, I do think that's the test I'm going to use, because that way you can use this as a checklist, and that way you can justify yourself. You can take this with you and say, wait a minute now, Dr. Wiggins and UCLA said that if I got this, and this, and then your advisor is more inclined to be like, okay, let me take a look. Now, hold on. Okay. All right, that makes sense. So that's the way I want you guys to use this document, to really, really question yourself, to do your best to pick the best test that you think that you should be using, and to just explore and experiment. It sounds like from you guys, a lot of you are just not, you might not be ready yet. You're not sure what you want to study. This is a great place to be, because now you have this extra information about quantitative, running quantitative analyses. And as you think through and you're in these courses and you're in your program, you can say, oh, wait a minute, I think I want to do that. Let me go back to this document and see if this makes sense. And so that's how I want you to use it. And yeah, and yeah, that's what I can say. It's kind of, use it as the resource that it is. Allow yourself to play around with SPSS before you go into, if you might, let's say you hadn't taken your class yet, or you're in the class and you need some kind of outside practice. Allow yourself to use that to walk yourself through. And that's all I have. And we have 10 minutes left. And I want to make sure we get all of our minutes in and take any questions, if anybody wonderings or anything like that. You're welcome, Marthea. Everybody is welcome. I'm so happy. I might take this time to just be like, you know what, Dr. Shakir, I would love to come there anytime. I would love to teach in person. I would love to do like a series of things. I would love to teach a course. I mean, I just love this stuff, and I feel like I am pretty sure I can meet students' needs through something like that. So I just throw that out there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wiggins.